I just want to say thank you so much for following along on my journey. My name is Cam Lancaster. I'm an online golf coach, and today we're going to talk about my journey going from a 7 handicap and really struggling going down to a +3 in just 3 years. So, who am I? Like I said, I'm an online golf coach who regularly helps golfers out who are struggling and really leads them to play the best golf of their life. It's not uncommon for my students to see a 5 to 10 shot improvement within 1 year. And if you're looking for proof, you can Google my business page, Lancaster Golf Performance, check out some reviews. So, I've worked with more than 10 NCAA golfers, 4 professional golfers, multiple club champions, many competitive junior golfers, and just everyday golfers, probably like yourself. I have more than 100 reviews on Google and Instagram, 5-star reviews. I'm an ambassador for TaylorMade, Golf Forever, One Club Trainer, Stack System, Total Golf Trainer. I run 3 in-person academies and an online academy. I'm the director of junior development at the Scott Kelk Certified World brand at Copetown Woods Golf Club, and I'm a member of the Toronto Players Tour, which is a mini tour in Ontario, Canada. So I founded the biofeel method, and it's basically taking your optimal biomechanics and developing feels for your swing that can really help you generate clean TrackMan data. So where I was, it's important to put shots in context. At my level, it was very tough to go from an 80 to a 70. Much easier to go from 100 to 90, 90 to 80. So I've been coaching for 2 years. This is about 5 years ago, and my worry was my methods would really not actually transfer my students. My worst nightmare was not to be able to play to perform as a coach. Right? So I really despised coaches like this growing up because I was trained by 2 PGA Tour killers, guys who, I trained a lot of PGA Tour players, and they in their own right, they were really good players themselves. So I really realized at that point I really needed to invest the time, and I wanted to make sure, that what my students were getting was the real thing, and that's something that's a bit of a beef for me with a lot of current coaches. Is a lot of current coaches will only play 5 times a year and really cannot hold a game like they're trying to preach. Right. And that's no knock on coaches. A lot of coaches are just busy. But for me, I wanted to ensure that, the methods I was preaching really worked. And I also just got the bug too. So my stats, I was only hitting 5 fairways in regulation. Greens in regulation was 8, putting 33 putts per round. My up and down percentage was actually pretty good, 65%. And I was probably hitting it about 275 yards off the tee. So this all really needed to improve. And that for me was, coming out to about shooting on a good day on like a decent golf course 75, and a bad day about 82, right? And that was a bit of a backslide for me. Like when I was 15 years old, I was regularly shooting around 73, 74, albeit on much shorter golf courses. But because I had, gone off and done other things, my golf game really declined, right? So what pulled me from my slump? So I started with this one simple belief: my best golf was in front of me. I always had that in the back of my mind, and that's really where it comes down to the mindset. I really felt like, my best golf was not behind me. I could actually start playing a lot better. And from there, I got to work. So I was very much in the beginner phase as a coach. So I tried everything and anything under the sun. And this is something that I would definitely not recommend to any golfer out there. Trying to fix your swing on YouTube is typically, it's going to lead to a lot of failure, right? So this led to a lot of roadblocks. I actually got worse. I was even struggling to break 80 on easy golf courses. And then from there, I really simplified everything. So the start of my transformation. So with the swing. So what I did is I went and saw my childhood coach, Scott Kelk, and we charted a plan together. This single lesson shaped me as a golfer because it is how I base all of my client transformations going forward. And so what Scott basically did for me is he laid down, I believe, about 4 to 5 really key points in my swing that I really needed to get better. So, I went to work on one simple lesson. For me, it was getting my hands lower at address, a couple other setup tweaks, a different grip structure. So I got my lead arm more internally rotated, trail arm more externally rotated. Really tried to feel the arms connected and more rotation. And I did a ton of drilling. So, at the end of the lesson, Scott's message to me was basically like almost a warning message. And I had been sending him stuff that I had been kind of working on. And, I had this week I show up with that swing. The next week I show up with that swing. There was a lot going on, right? And he basically said you have to compartmentalize the coach and the player. So when you're actually playing, you keep it really simplistic, right? And that's a message that I preach to all of my clients today. Like, if you really want to make that improvement, you have to keep it simple, right? So how I worked on it, I went to work, and a lot of it, where I fixed it was in the practice methods, right? So, I did a lot of mirror swings, right? So just looking in front of a mirror and really trying to connect the reality with the feel. A lot of practice swings. Like I took advice from Hal Sutton, who was a great player in his own mind. And he believed that, like let's say he hit 1 million shots in his career. He wishes he could have gone back and done 500,000 of those as practice swings. So when you're constantly hitting, you're a prisoner of the golf ball, right? So the more and more I did practice swings, the more I was able to get creative with the movement and really feel it. I did a lot of slow motion swings so I can really ingrain it. A lot of wedge swings. So that was about at the start, 80 to 90% of my practice was just hitting a pitching wedge. And that, with a pitching wedge, you have a much wider room for error. So you can get a little bit more creative with that movement and really over feel the new movement. So I did a lot of flip flop practice, and this is something that I developed because when I was, this was about 13 years ago, I really got the bad driver yips, and I couldn't hit my drive. It was going 50 yards left or 50 yards right. I couldn't really figure it out. So I went to the range with just an 8 iron, which I was hitting really well, and then my driver, and I just started flip flopping back and forth from driver to 8 iron, driver to 8 iron. Okay, and that really helped me. And I did that. I implemented that practice method, and it really helped out. And then I did randomized 3-to-1 practice with one swing thought. So the randomized practice, I would hit like an 8 iron to a target over there, then a 7 iron to another target, and then a driver visualizing a fairway. And that really made a big difference. So I did 3 practice swings and then would hit one to really just try and ingrain that movement. And I went with one swing thought. That was the absolute key. The next piece to this was the mental game overhaul. Like I really needed to get my mind right. I had a lot of scar tissue, just like any other golfer, from all the years where I struggled. I just needed to evolve mentally. I was a terrible thinker on the golf course and was often scared and constantly nervous. I was nervous to hit shots in front of students before this transformation, and that changed when I set a plan in motion based on many years of study. Like I was almost to the point where I would withdraw from golf tournaments as a junior golfer because of the nerves. I just couldn't handle them. Right. So I went down rabbit holes with Bob Rotella concepts. So really, dialed in my process. I remember writing down a pre-shot routine, and then it was about a 9-step routine, everything down to how much, when I take a breath, when I take a practice swing, and I practiced that in my living room about 1,000 times until it became comfortable. I worked on my confidence, just having a better self-image. And then also, another Bob Rotella concept was really getting dialed in with the short game. That was a big thing too, which I'll talk about in a bit. Playing smarter golf, stuff like decade golf, really just simplistically, trying to play for the fat parts of the fairways, trying to play with a little bit more club coming into greens. That made a huge difference. And then voice note brain rewiring. This is something I kind of came up with myself. And I would basically just have 10 points on a piece of paper, and I would do a voice note into my phone of and these 10 points were what makes me a great player. And it was less about just kind of building up this image in my mind of who I was, but it was more about the efforts that I put in. Because one thing that we know now from neuroscience is that you want to see yourself as a hard worker versus this great champion. Usually hard workers become champions. If you see yourself as a champion, then you try and protect that self-image and take less risk, and actually it can lead to cheating. So the voice note was really wired around how much effort that I put in, and each part of my game, the great effort that I put in leads to good results. I also did a lot of meditation in the sauna. Would go in there, got like a little home unit, and would just listen to certain meditations that really allowed me to relax, and I could transfer that to the golf course. Also did some walking meditations as well too, when I would walk the dog, and that made a huge difference for me too, because I was able to just get on the golf course and really feel like I was in a relaxed, peaceful state. So the next part of this was the golf fitness part, side of things. Like I was, in terrible shape. I was maxing out my club head speed at 104 miles an hour. That speed in my era of junior golf could cut it, but if I wanted to play at a pro level, I would be left way behind, right? So, my current club head speed right now is 112 miles per hour, but I've not lost any accuracy. I've actually started to hit it straighter at that speed, and this equates to a 300-yard average between 290 to 310 yards. The next goal for me is 330. So I'm really proud of this improvement, because this is something that's been the hardest thing for me, and I experimented with a lot of different speed methods, and I've really found a protocol that works for my clients. And it's a protocol that will ensure that you don't get injured, right? Because I had a neck injury, a back injury, patellar tendonitis in my I believe my left knee, and all that. Those rehabbing, going through that rehab, I would just lose my speed, and I had to come back from it. Okay, so how I changed this was doing the protocol basically was daily stretching, so 20 minutes at night. and then mobilizing joints using the Golf Forever training system. So I would always mobilize everything before I would actually play golf or before I would do a lift. A lot of physio assessments. I consulted many different physiotherapists, sports physios who knew a lot about the body. And then pushing through injuries, that was a big one too. It was less about pushing through the injuries, to be honest. It was more just about learning what my body can and can't do, and then doing a lot of stability work in the gym. So not just getting stronger, but stabilizing everything and really just being in good balance. And then the strength training, just simple powerlifting. Like I got the chance to do a session with a power lifter. He was a power lifter and a world long drive champ, and he basically, just told me that just get into some powerlifting, really simple stuff, squats, deadlifts, lunges. That stuff is the stuff that really creates more of that fast twitch muscle fiber, which led into the speed training, right? So I had to build that base of strength first before I did the speed training. I think that's what a lot of people get wrong. And it goes back to the old saying from a guy named Paul Chek, who I'm a big fan of. You can't fire a cannon from a canoe, right? So, the speed training for me was it came, and I learned this the hard way. It came secondary to the strength training, which is something I'm still cultivating to this day. So the short game. So, in my mind, I always felt like I was a very good putter and a good chipper. But when, we looked at the statistics, me and my coach, it was not translating, right? And this is something that me and my brother, yeah, he was a really good NCAA Division I player. He coaches me, and we looked at the statistics, and it just wasn't cutting it. So I would, have some putting performances, 36 plus putts, chipping performance, 65% up and down. I thought that was good, but to me, I could have even been better. I know how I fix this, developing new shots. So, just learning how to hit 3 or 4 different trajectory shots, up and down challenges. So the practice methods to me was where this really started to change. So, the simplest form of that would be to take a ball, your favorite wedge and your putter, and just try and get up and down from really random spots. Every hole's a par two, play 9 or 18 holes and just get to work on that. Sometimes play 27 holes, and that can have a huge impact on your scoring. And then visual work too. So becoming a spot chipper as opposed to just trying to, trying to make chips. I'm really just trying to dial it into a certain spot and just eye timing. So instead of like staring at the ball for 3 to 5 seconds, keeping your focus out there, eyes come back and then go. Right. So that was some of the things that I worked on there. And then putting, I learned a system called Tour Read from one of my other coaches. Oh, sorry about that. Let's just get rid of that. Okay, cool. Yeah, so putting, I learned Tour Read. That was really, really big for my confidence. So Tour Read is a system that my coach Ralph Bauer developed, and it's used by a lot of PGA Tour players. It's basically a very systematic way to read greens, and that's something that I teach a lot of players on these to this day. And then just dialing in the mechanics. So I did a lot of work on the arc putting, and that really, really helped me just groove a very consistent stroke. And then speed training, so visual training, that's kind of to the same method with the chipping stuff where I did a simple drill where I'd stare out at the target for 5 seconds and then pull the eyes back and then release it. And I was looking at a very small spot on the back of the hole. So I would do a lot of that speed training. And now when you get your read right, you get the mechanics right, and you get the speed right, it's a recipe for making a lot more putts. So here are the stats after all the changes. So my stats now, I'm hitting about 9 out of 14 fairways in regulation. The most important thing is I'm only losing a golf ball every 3 rounds, which as a professional golfer, you pretty much need to have that as baseline. Greens in regulation, I'm up to 12 out of 18 on a good day, 14 to 15, which is a pretty good average. Greens in regulation, dispersion tracking really helped me. So Scott, my one coach, he had shown me how he tracks dispersion with his tour players. And it really just made me aware of, okay, what is a good dispersion? What is a bad dispersion? It's not just enough to hit greens in regulation, but when you're hitting those greens, how tight are you to the hole? So if you get under a certain percentage point, then that's basically putting you at a tour level. So that's something that I work on with my students to this day. Putting was down to 32. That's kind of the next frontier for me, wanting to get into the 20s at the courses I play on. I think it's definitely possible. Up and down percentage went up 5% to 70%, which I'm happy with. And then now I'm hitting it on average 300 yards off the tee, so about a 25-yard improvement off the tee. Next steps for me is to go into par in tournaments and then get to a +6 handicap. I'm not going to claim that, I'm some absolute world beater, but I've definitely seen some incredible improvements in my own game. And a lot of it is just now being able to have the right amount of time to put in that practice, right? And that's another thing is all of this took a ton of work for me to get to the point. It was more a lot of work on learning it. Once you have the systems down, This is what I say to a lot of my students. You only really need to, spend an hour a day, or maybe 2 hours 4 times a week to really develop these different types of skill sets, right? So in terms of your transformation, I'd recommend book a call. I'll put in the link below, and I guarantee you can transfer your game. Like, I really do think that any golfer learning my systems can go from 100 to 90, 90 to 80, 80 to 70, then beyond. A lot of it is just really getting those core answers as to why you're struggling, and not taking the shoot from the hip approach, or getting too complex with some of the answers. Like, the usually the best answers are the most simplistic ones. So thank you so much for following along on my journey. If you have any questions for me, please just hit me up on Instagram at Lancaster Golf Performance, or you can send me an email to lancastergolfacademy@gmail.com. Best of luck.